So let's call this to order. I want to thank everybody for coming. We're going to do this a little bit out of order because our first speaker is in two places at once this morning, right? And she has to leave and get to Baltimore for a meeting she's going to be late for, and we really appreciate her being here. So instead of having the usual welcoming and going around the room, we're going to let Donna Pickett. Well, I think we should go. Oh, okay. Well, then we will do that. Okay, thank you. So we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves, and then Donna will start, and then we'll do some of the other issues that we would like to do later. This should not be turned on right now. Thank you. We'll turn it on at 10 o'clock.
Okay, thanks.
10 o'clock. Just to let people know, my name is Nancy Lee. I am the new designated federal officer for the Chronic Fatigue Syndrome Advisory Committee. I am also the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Women's Health at the Department of Health and Human Services. And I'm very glad you're here. Dane, why don't we start with you, and we'll go around. And Dane, just to remind everyone, this is being audio streamed to anybody who wants to call in. So we have to speak into these mics, and perhaps if somebody could tell us how we know it's on.
The little red light right here.
I don't see a little red. Oh, there it is. There's a little red light here. So make sure your little red light is on.
Good morning. Dane Cook. I'm one of the committee members from the University of Wisconsin. I do research on exercise and functional brain imaging and chronic fatigue syndrome.
My name's Steve Krafchick. I'm an attorney, and I represent people with chronic fatigue syndrome, particularly trying to get them their long-term disability benefits through private policies.
And Vincent, I'm a general internist from Mayo Clinic, and I currently study fatigue and fibromyalgia.
Lenny Jason, I'm a psychologist at DePaul University, particularly interested in diagnostic issues, epidemiology, and particularly case definition.
Susan Levine, New York City, see a lot of chronic fatigue syndrome patients and fibromyalgia patients.
Hi, I'm Teresa Michelle. I'm in the Division of Pulmonary, Allergy, and Rheumatology Products, Center for New Drugs at the FDA.
Good morning. Marty Bond, Senior Public Health Advisor with the Office on Women's Health and alternate DFO.
Christopher Snell. I'm a professor at University of the Pacific in Stockton, California, and I'm interested in functional aspects of chronic fatigue syndrome. I'm also the current chair of CIFSAC.
Good morning. I'm Beth Collins Sharp. I'm from the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, where I'm Senior Advisor for women.
I think you have to turn it off after you're done.
Good morning. Sorry. My name is Ermias Bala. I'm from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I'm the ex officio for CDC at CIFSAC.
I'm Nancy Klimas from the University of Miami. I'm an investigator and clinician. I care for patients with chronic fatigue syndrome.
I'm Galen Marshall, University of Mississippi. I'm a clinical immunologist interested in biomarkers for chronic fatigue syndrome.
Jordan Dimitrikov from Harvard Medical School. I'm interested in chronic pelvic pain syndrome, interstitial cystitis, and its overlap with chronic fatigue syndrome.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Eileen Holderman. I am the patient advocate.
Thank you very much. Donna Pickett is going to give a presentation to us about ICD. Donna is with the National Center for Health Statistics in Hyattsville, Maryland, which is part of CDC. And she is going to, I think, give us a bit of an overview and also answer some of the questions that she has received from the committee. Thank you very much, Donna, for coming here.
Red light. Thank you all. Again, my name is Donna Pickett. I'm with the National Center for Health Statistics. My specific responsibilities at NCHS is team lead for classification activities, specifically ICD and ICF, and my remarks today will focus on ICD. Are they going to advance the slides, or I can work without them if they all have copies? Well, if all the committee members actually have copies of the slides, while they try to work the wonders with technology, I can just walk through this. Okay. For those of you who are not familiar with the ICD, though I think many people probably are, the International Classification of Diseases has been in existence for about 100 years. The current version that is being used in the United States is ICD-9-CM, which is a clinical modification of the WHO classification. I'll apologize in advance. The ICD is used for a variety of purposes. Its primary function started out as being used for classifying causes of mortality for death registration. But more recently, many countries also use it for the capture of morbidity statistics, inpatient hospital, physicians' offices, outpatient clinics, home health, rehab, a variety of healthcare settings. Also, it is used for reimbursement, as many of you know, particularly the providers that have to send in claims. In order to submit a claim, you need an ICD-9-CM code. Next slide, please. Again, ICD-9-CM is a clinical modification of the WHO classification. ICD-9, as published by the World Health Organization, was published in 1974. The U.S., in agreement with the World Health Organization, created a clinical modification of the ICD, which has more detail than the WHO classification. ICD-9-CM has been updated annually since 1985. Prior to ICD-10, WHO did not have an update process. So for those countries that had clinical modifications, it was very important to try to keep the classification as current as possible. So again, we've been updating ICD-9-CM in the U.S. since 1985. We have a public process, the ICD-9-CM Coordination and Maintenance Committee. Currently, it meets twice a year. In March and September of each year. Proposals to modify the classification can come from a variety of stakeholders and users of the classification, including hospitals, specialty groups, subspecialty groups. It also can come from an individual provider. I know one of the questions of interest was specifically related to the coding of chronic fatigue syndrome in ICD-9-CM. On this slide, I show you the first request to have information about chronic fatigue syndrome was requested in 1990. Excuse me. And an alphabetic index entry was created for chronic fatigue syndrome, referring the code to the coder to code 780.7. A second request, and this time a unique request for a new code for chronic fatigue syndrome, was requested in 1997. That request was brought to the C&M committee, and a new code was approved and implemented October of 1998. That code, 780.71, is titled Chronic Fatigue Syndrome. So that code has been used in the U.S. for the last 13 years to capture chronic fatigue syndrome. ICD-10, which is the classification that basically is being used worldwide, except for here in the U.S. for morbidity purposes. ICD-10 was approved by the International Conference for the 10th revision of the ICD in 1989. It was adopted by the World Health Assembly in 1990. The tabular list, which is the bulk of the book, was published in 1992. However, WHO was not able to publish the alphabetic index until a couple of years later. The key issue about that, and you're probably wondering, why do I have that on the screen? Well, you can have a tabular list, but you can't do anything with it unless you have an alphabetic index, because the alphabetic index is what guides you toward the use of the classification. So the full classification and coding rules were not available completely until 1995. Next slide. Once the U.S. had all of the components of the ICD, we began a process of evaluating ICD-10 for use in the U.S. for morbidity purposes specifically. On the mortality side, which is the coding of death certificates, the U.S. has used ICD-10, plain vanilla, as published by WHO since 1999. As part of the review process, one of the aspects that was looked at was whether or not ICD-10 actually addressed all of the concepts that had actually been added to ICD-9-CM since the annual update process for 9-CM began in 1985. We did the review in consultation with a large number of physician groups, clinical coders from the inpatient and outpatient settings, and other users of ICD-9-CM, which includes researchers, epidemiologists, and others. There were 3 phases of development. The first phase from 1994 to 1995. And again, that was dependent upon having all parts of the classification available from WHO. Phase 2, from 1995 to 1996, we opened up a comment period for users to tell us specifically what issues, if any, they had with ICD-10 and where it may have been lacking. Again, as I showed you in the previous slide, the World Health Assembly approved ICD-10 in 1990. So fast forward to 1995, 1996, and as you might guess, there's probably a lot of new information that had come about since WHO had approved ICD-10. Phase 3, well, and we're sort of in phase 3 now. In 1997, we had a public comment period. We posted the entire ICD-10-CM on the internet and invited public comment. Following that comment period, we incorporated a number of changes into ICD-10-CM to enhance its utility for a number of purposes. There was a pilot test conducted by the American Hospital Association in conjunction with the American Health Information Management Association in 2003, and there were further modifications to ICD-10-CM based on the results of the pilot test. From there on, we have been actually updating ICD-10-CM every year simultaneously with updates to ICD-9-CM. Again, ICD-9-CM, while it has its limitations, we were able to incorporate a number of new concepts into ICD-9-CM. Sometimes not very well, but again, to try to capture some data is sometimes better than capturing no data at all. So bird flu, SARS, all of those things have been added to the classification. But again, it came a time where I think the U.S. realized that we could no longer update ICD-9-CM because we had run out of space. There were no opportunities in some chapters to add one single new code. And so ICD-10-CM became an important focus. Next slide, please. For ICD-10-CM, we will continue to use the process that we currently use to update ICD-9-CM. Many of you may not know, but ICD-9-CM, we are only doing minimal updates to ICD-9-CM leading up to October 1, 2013, when ICD-10-CM and ICD-10-PCS, which is the procedure coding system that will be used in the inpatient setting, will be implemented. But again, we've been maintaining 9-CM and 10-CM side by side, and we've been doing it through our public process. Proposals to add new information to ICD-10-CM need to be sent to NCHS 2 months in advance of a meeting. Meetings are open to the public. A tentative agenda is published in the Federal Register approximately 1 month in advance of the meeting, and the tentative agenda is also published on the NCHS website. Comments are encouraged during the meeting, but we also ask that people submit their comments in writing so that we have a public record of those comments. As I mentioned earlier, ICD-10-CM will be implemented October 1, 2013. And the implementation of ICD-10-CM is tied to the standards adoption process specified under HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. There were multiple hearings about migrating from ICD-9-CM to the ICD-10 code sets. The National Committee on Vital and Health Statistics, which is also a federal advisory committee, held public hearings, approximately 8 hearings over the course of 1997 to 2003, and ultimately a letter to the Secretary was issued November 2003, recommending moving to the ICD-10 code sets. A notice of proposed rulemaking was published August 2008, and a final rule was published January of 2009. Next slide, please. One of the things that I know of interest was the placement of in ICD-10 for chronic fatigue syndrome. The WHO version has post-viral fatigue syndrome, G93.3, which is in the nervous system chapter. Also included there in the WHO version is benign myalgic encephalomyelitis. Next slide. Chronic fatigue syndrome and ICD-10-CM, the current version, is at R5382, but the code post-viral fatigue syndrome still stands as well. In July of this year, we received a proposal from the Coalition for ME and CFS, next slide please, asking that ICD-10-CM be modified and move chronic fatigue syndrome into G93.3, the post-viral fatigue syndrome. This proposal was presented and discussed at the September 14th Coordination and Maintenance Committee meeting. In addition to the option proposed by the coalition, NCHS also put forward an option which was to move chronic fatigue syndrome into G93.3, but also to expand the code so that a unique code would be created for chronic fatigue syndrome under G93.3 to ensure that data captured for the last 13 years with the current chronic fatigue syndrome code in ICD-9-CM would not disappear. So we submitted that as an option for public discussion. The public comment period is still open. It does not close until November 18th. So I really, unfortunately, don't have anything to share with the committee about the results of what has come in thus far, but I wanted to mention that we are still in an open comment period. Next slide. The last slide, it's just the websites for the Coordination and Maintenance Committee, where you will find the actual proposal and a summary of the discussions regarding that proposal and the other proposals that were discussed on that day. And also, if one is interested in looking at ICD-10-CM as a whole, there is the website for all of the files and coding guidelines and relevant material related to ICD-10-CM. And again, I didn't want to have too much down in the details, so we could allow time for questions relative to the CNM process or any other issues related to the classification. So thank you, and I hope I'll be able to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Donna. I've been reminded that we've been a little remiss, and we haven't formally opened the meeting, so...
We're learning.
Yeah, you can forgive me on that, and then we won't have to ask Donna to repeat her presentation. So the meeting is now formally opened. Thank you. Call to order. And I'd open the floor for questions. Nancy.
So when this public open comment session's over, what is the process to make that decision of option 1, option 2, or deny both options?
Well, we'll evaluate the comments, so it's kind of hard to say, exactly what would happen with this particular proposal. But I can give you, by way of example, some of the options that have occurred with other proposals. Yes, one of the options, well, in reviewing the comments that come in, there may be overwhelming support for the proposal. So obviously that would make it quite easy to move forward. But also an option could be that there is a divided opinion about the proposal. And the other thing about the proposal, there are 2 issues related to the proposals. As I had mentioned previously, ICD-9-CM and ICD-10-CM are currently in a partial freeze. What that means is we would not be implementing any new codes for 9-CM and 10-CM to keep the classification stable while the industry prepares its systems, and et cetera, to use ICD-10-CM. The industry requested that we do this. So the only new codes that would be created at this point in time would be related to new diseases and new technology. And again, that relates to the procedure side. So in commenting, submitters will have to comment on whether or not they agree with one of the 2 options presented, or they could actually submit an alternative, which would have to be discussed at a future meeting. But the other thing they'll be asked to do is to indicate whether or not they agree that this does or doesn't meet the criteria for making a change during this partial freeze. So we'll have 2 issues to deal with as part of the comment period. But again, by way of example, again, one could have complete support for a proposal. There could be partial support, or there could be issues raised that would require clarification, which likely would mean possibly coming back with a revised proposal to a subsequent public meeting. Or it could be totally rejected with no support for the proposal. And again, we'd have to look at the comments to see how that would work. In the past, we've had some proposals that were not fully supported. However, based on the total of comments, sometimes a proposal can be revised and still brought back to a future meeting. So again, a lot has to do with the proposal itself and the comments that are received.
If this advisory committee in these 2 days discusses this and adds its thoughts to this discourse, how do we best provide that to your process?
Generally speaking, advisory committees don't often weigh in as a committee. They generally will weigh in as individuals. But again, we're open to all comments. So how you choose to conduct your business and come forward with a proposal or comments, we would be open to receiving those in any fashion that you deem appropriate for your body. because I know the FACA committees have specific requirements. So.
Lenny, I would just ask anybody that's asking a question, we had a request, as this is audio taped but not video taped live at the moment, if you could just state your name and your affiliation so that people know who you are. Lenny.
Thank you, Donna, for coming to this meeting. We certainly appreciate you making... Lenny Jason, DePaul University. Takes me a while to learn. Thank you, Chris. So we really appreciate you coming to this meeting, and I know that it took time to be able to make this part of your busy agenda, because I know you had some other appointments. You had mentioned before that we should make comments individually to your group. Because we're an advisory committee, and we make recommendations to the Secretary of Health and Human Services. If we were to make a recommendation to the Secretary of Health and Human Services concerning our preference for possibly option 1 or option 2, might that have some weight in terms of your deliberations as a recommendation to the Secretary, of which the Secretary of Health and Human Services might then give you their preference? That's question 1. And question 2 has to do with option 1 versus option 2, which I know that a couple months ago, Pandora, MECFS Coalition, and others, Marley Silverman, had made a presentation to you, and they have had a comment about option 1 versus option 2 with a strong preference for option 1. And I'm wondering if you might be willing for this committee to articulate some of the reasons that they felt option 1 was superior to option 2. Thank you.
Let me try to start with your last question first. The difference between option 1 and option 2, option 2 attempts to recognize the fact that there has been a unique code for chronic fatigue syndrome in ICD-9-CM for the last 13 years. And there are a number of researchers and others who use that code. So for option 1, which was basically to take the term chronic fatigue syndrome and add it back into G93.3 with no further specification, some researchers and others felt that to be extremely problematic. They did not want to see the data disappear for that code. So that was the reason we put forward an option 2, which was in recognition of the fact that there has been a unique code for 13 years. Now, the other issue regarding this, excuse me, submission of a recommendation to the Secretary, I really can't speak to that. We've not had a circumstance like that in the past. The way the public comments work for us is generally we receive individual comments either from hospitals, medical groups. I don't recall in recent history that we've actually received a comment letter related to a coding issue from a federal advisory committee.
Can I just a follow-up question to, just a procedural question to Nancy, because this is new terrain that we're on particularly. I'm wondering if you could give our clarification to our committee. At least in the past, we have had recommendations that we've made to issues like this and others, and I'm wondering whether this would be appropriate to make a recommendation, even though it has not been done before, to the Secretary. And once again, this is Lenny Jason at DePaul University.
And this is Nancy Lee, DFO. I know that last May we did have this recommendation, right? And it went to the Secretary. We encouraged at the time for the individuals around the room to make sure that they sent it through the normal channels that NCHS has. And we can certainly, if you all make some sort of recommendation in this regard, we can get it to Donna through either directly through to her or through the channels that Donna showed us on the web link before November 18th, because we need to make sure it's made by that date. I don't know, because I'm new and I'd have to look into it, the more subtle response to your question.
And just again, a quick follow-up question, because this is, again, Lenny Jason at DePaul. Because we have made a recommendation as a formal body, and my understanding it was unanimous to make this change, is it possible for us to find out what the reaction to the Secretary was to that recommendation made 6 months ago?
We can look into that.
Susan? Levine?
Yeah, hi, it's Sue Levine from New York. I'm curious to know, I mean, I think it makes sense for, instead of each of us weighing in separately on this recommendation, that perhaps we can come to a conclusion based on the discussion of our committee regarding any changes. But what I want to know is, more procedurally, what occurs if we disagree with the final decision? Is there a chance to appeal it, or who really decides whether this recommendation is made and is approved? And if we disagree with it, can we appeal?
Susan, I'm not clear on what you mean, appeal.
Well, you know, let's say you decide as a group not to go forward with what we want to do in terms of changing the existing coding system. Are we stuck with it for another year, or is there a chance to readdress this in a shorter period of time?
Again, a lot would depend on not just a comment made by this group, but other users of the classification as well. So again, without seeing the totality of what those comments might be, it's hard for me to say what the next steps would be. Again, you know, comments could be fully supportive, could be partially supportive, or not supportive at all, which would lead to other discussions. And again, many times when things are not fully supported, we try to work with the different groups to come up with an option that might be a consensus option that would then be represented at a public meeting, because it all has to go back to a public meeting.
I see. Thank you.
Nancy?
And when there's the we thing, who makes the decision? Who's the committee that decides to weigh these different comments, and how much are professionals or physicians or researchers weighted compared to, say, the general public?
Well, again, the comment letters come in from a variety of groups, and again, I can't say who might be commenting on this, but again, it could be medical groups, it could be other provider organization types, it could be like the Hospital Association. We try to look at all the comments as they come in, and we don't weight them in any one direction or another, but one of the key things we are looking at is whether or not the comments really relate to the classification and placement of conditions within the classification, and the appropriateness of comments related to the need for instructional notes and things of that nature. One of the things that we don't do as part of the public process for updating the classification, we do not look at reimbursement issues, just because that's a whole different track. What we're looking to do is ensure that what is being added to the classification or modified within the classification is clinically accurate and is consistent with the structure and conventions of the ICD. But we look at all the comments to look for those particular issues. Oh, and I think the other thing you were asking, who ultimately makes the decisions. As is noted on our website, the final decision makers is the director for NCHS and the center administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And the reason being, those two organizations have responsibility for the classification as a whole. But we do reach out to others, and again, people will reach out to us as well because we do get a lot of input from the medical groups.
Lenny?
Lenny, Jason, and again, a couple questions. My understanding is that your agency is under the HHS rubric, so that the secretary would be the person overseeing your particular agency, or am I incorrect on that assumption? And again, this is Lenny, Jason. That's question one. Question two is, because we made a recommendation 6 months ago, very specifically, I'm wondering whether that recommendation got to your office and whether you have considered it and have any comment on it. And third question really has to do with option 1 versus 2. You were very eloquent in talking about some of the rationale for option 2. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to also speak about the arguments you've heard that were given to you in September for option 1. Thank you.
Well, I think the rationale for option 1 is included in the background information that was presented with the proposal. So I don't know whether there is more that I can actually contribute to that discussion. Again, the concern about moving chronic fatigue syndrome into G93.3 with no further expansion of that category means that, again, statistics data for 13 years disappears. And that was a major concern from other stakeholders. But in terms of what the coalition was requesting, which was just to move the condition into that G93.3, I think that speaks to the fact that they were hoping to have chronic fatigue align itself the way it is in ICD-10. But again, the issue there is ICD-10 did not have a breakout for chronic fatigue syndrome, and it did not exist in the WHO ICD-9. So we're having to deal with transitioning from ICD-9-CM to ICD-10-CM and the best way to accomplish that. And I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure it did.
Once again, Lenny, Jason at DePaul University. The first two questions really had to do with whether your agency falls within the mandate of the Secretary of Health and Human Services and what any implication of that might be, or whether you're outside of that particular kind of mandate. And then the second thing has to do with our recommendation from our committee and whether you have actually seen it, considered it, reflected on it, and made any decisions about the worthwhileness of that particular motion.
I have been made aware of the recommendation. However, what the recommendation did not do, it did not fully specify what modifications you wanted in the classification. And so kind of hard to react to a recommendation that just says move this when you actually need to have, and I don't know if you're familiar with how the proposals are done, but you have to show the proposal as it relates to what it looks like in the tabular list and how you are modifying it according to the structure and conventions of the classification. So having a recommendation that says move something, but actually having a proposal that can be brought to the public for full discussion, we need to have a full proposal for discussion, which is what the coalition brought forward as part of their submission in July.
Steve Kravchik.
Thank you. I'm an attorney and I represent a lot of people who have chronic fatigue syndrome and other conditions. And the ICD-9 often weighs heavily in reimbursement questions and disability questions. And I didn't realize that that wasn't considered as you're modifying the classification. Because, for instance, if you would classify it under something that would lean more to a mental health condition, say, than a physical condition, that would have great implications for whether people at Microsoft or Weyerhaeuser or any major corporation can get disability benefits beyond 24 months. Something very, very critical to a lot of people in the country. And also it has great implications for providers being able to get reimbursement for care they render. And if those aren't factored in, how how does the jump get made? I mean, we know they're used, I mean, the most common use of the ICD-9 now is in your health insurance reimbursement. So anyway, could you comment on that?
The reimbursement issues, again, are outside of how and why we update the classification. Business decisions, yes, are made by the insurers relative to the codes, but we do not interact with them at all on those business decisions. And yes, there are some conditions that reside in certain chapters, for instance, mental health. But again, the placement of those things is generally based on where WHO has placed them. And so we just build upon what WHO has done in many instances. But again, I do understand that there are reimbursement and coverage implications, but that is not factored into the discussions of updating the classification.
Anne, and then Susan.
Donna, thanks for the very informative presentation. I have a question on chronic fatigue versus chronic fatigue
Please
syndrome.
identify yourself.
Ann Vincent, Mayo Clinic. So my chronic fatigue is present in many medical conditions. So did I hear you say that option 2 is going to fold chronic fatigue into, how's chronic fatigue going to be separated from chronic fatigue syndrome? That's my question.
Okay. The only thing that would be removed from the R53 82 would be the term chronic fatigue syndrome. That was what was being proposed to be moved into the G93.3. The code for chronic fatigue would remain in the signs and symptoms chapter. So if the provider has documented chronic fatigue, not chronic fatigue syndrome, there would still be a unique code to identify that particular case, and chronic fatigue syndrome would be moved out and grouped with the G93.3.
Susan Levine, CIFSEC member.
Hi, Sue Levine, CIFSEC member. This concerns me that the reimbursement issues are not taken into account. I mean, it seems to me that ICD-9 codes have been primarily used by providers and for purposes of reimbursement, and I don't see the point of changing it if we're not going to take into account reimbursement issues. I mean, who are you changing it for? What group of, are you for researchers, and you're concerned about the loss of data for the last 13 years?
Well, it's not just researchers, it's providers. I mean, it's all users of data. And let me just address the issue of reimbursement. The ICD-9 CM has been used long before it was used for reimbursement purposes. Medicare didn't start using the codes for reimbursement for DRGs until 1983. The classification was in use since 1979. So there are a number of other reasons that the classification is used, but trying to incorporate reimbursement use cases, which vary by payer, is next to impossible. What we are doing is modifying the classification to be consistent more or less with the WHO classification. And again, it's clinical, it's accuracy, but it is not reimbursement because there are too many variations on a theme to try to sort out the reimbursement issues. But yes, we're aware that reimbursement is a use case, but it is, again, there are multiple use cases, so reimbursement is not the only one. But historically, we do not modify the classification for reimbursement purposes. And in fact, at the CNM meetings, that announcement is made at every meeting. So that's historical since I can remember. And I've been doing this for about 16 years. But even as attending as an outsider, reimbursement issues are not discussed as part of the meeting.
Eileen Holderman, CIFSEC member.
I couldn't have said it better. Thank you. I was wondering, I know that public comment plays a role in changing codes. How much of a role does consulting other agencies such as the CDC and looking at their medical literature play a role?
Literature is submitted to us many times with proposals, but also in terms of people commenting. Many of the medical groups will also provide a literature review. And if we are having difficulty sorting out the variations in what is being presented, we will reach out to other medical groups to try to help sort out the issues. So it's not just within the CDC family. We have established links with other external groups that we work with frequently to help us sort out the issues. But of course, we would also look toward CDC, AHRQ, and others in trying to sort out the issues related to a particular proposal.
Does one agency have more prominence, or do you give more weight to one agency over another?
No.
Leonard Jason, CIFSEC member.
This issue has generated a tremendous amount of controversy over the last few months in terms of our members in our group getting emails and phone calls and other types of interactions with the larger patient and physician community. I'm wondering whether your office has also gotten a lot of communications with outside individuals concerning this issue. That's the first question. The second question is, do you have a sense of why this is such a important and pressing issue for the patient community, which possibly has generated for us and possibly for you the amount of attention? And number three, do you have a sense of the difference between what chronic fatigue is versus chronic fatigue syndrome?
The generation of email, currently all comments are going into a general CNM inbox. Staff and I are not reviewing those comments at this point, though I realize that inbox is filling up rapidly. But again, because the comment period doesn't close until the 18th, we're not looking at any of the comments at this point. But yes, we can see that there's a lot of activity and emails going into the inbox, but we've not made any attempt, and this is normal practice. We wait until the end of the comment period to start sorting through the comment letters. It's a much better process when you do it that way, because this way you're not getting an early view of one sort or the other. We sort them out at the end, and then we try to review them and figure out what's actually going on, rather than doing this on a daily basis. Excuse me. You're mentioning something about like definitions. Again, definitions aren't in the classification. We look to the provider community to help us with those definitions. But again, at the end of the day, if a provider has diagnosed a patient with any disease, doesn't matter whether it's chronic fatigue syndrome or appendicitis, they are using their clinical judgment in making that diagnosis determination, and that's what we go with. So again, we're not looking at the definitions or even the case definitions, of which I know there are several, because in preparing for the CNM meeting in September, we were made aware that there were conflicting or varying definitions out there. But again, definitions are not in the classification. So while we're aware of them, it's not how we update the classification.
Just a follow-up question. I mean, the process by which you elicit feedback through comments seems to be appropriate for the things that you have to do as an agency. I'm just kind of wondering whether there is particular expertise in this Chronic Fatigue Syndrome Advisory Committee, which represents kind of scientists, patient organizations, patients, practitioners, whether there have been times in the past history when particularly organizations that are as multidisciplinary as we are sought out for some type of specific kind of consultation or advice when particularly controversial and difficult decisions have to be made in the classification effort by your agency?
Generally, in trying to sort out issues, we would go back to subject matter experts, and by that I mean the medical community. So it could be the AMA, and again, it depends on the issue. I'm not talking chronic fatigue syndrome specifically. It could be the AMA, it could be the Academy of Urology, it could be orthopedic surgeons. So we reach back to external groups to work with us to help us sort out those issues. And we do have established links for that. As an advisory committee, normally we would not have reached back to an entire advisory committee. We would be focusing on specific subject matter experts.
Nancy just wanted to make a comment.
Well, or ask a question, actually. Yes, I know. Thank you. Donna, just to put this process for ICD-10 and ICD-9 in context, about how many conditions are covered under ICD-10? I know it's thousands.
Yes, exactly how many thousands,
but in the order of magnitude?
Well, again, it would depend on if you're talking just total number of codes versus number of conditions. We really haven't had a count of how many conditions. But needless to say, I think we pretty much cover from A to Z. But there are approximately 160,000 codes in ICD-10 CM, some with varying degrees of granularity versus not.
So you are responsible for assuring 160,000 codes?
Yes.
Okay.
Susan Levine.
Hi, thanks. I'm still trying to understand the process of how the committee for ICD-9, ICD-10 coding works. And I guess a little following up on Lenny Jason's question and Steve's question about regarding, for instance, disability issues. Do you ever have people from Social Security, disability, or representatives from private disability companies weigh in on your choice of whether or not to update the coding process?
It's been rare that an insurance company will actually weigh in. We have had attendance by some representatives, but in terms of actually submitting formal comment letters on a given clinical entity, no. Generally, they defer to the clinical subject matter experts for that clinical expertise. How they handle a code after it's created or how they handle current codes is their business decision.
We have public comment in 1 minute, so I'll just take Lenny's question and then we'll wrap things up.
It's very good to hear that you occasionally, under controversial times, reach out to very important scientific and other advocacy and legal arenas to basically be able to make these types of difficult decisions. In this area of CFS, there is an international scientific organization that represents the science of this particular field. The question I have is, are you aware of that scientific organization? Would it be appropriate in any way to reach out to that scientific organization that covers the realm of chronic fatigue syndrome? And could some consultation with some of the officers of that particular body be instructive at this time, given the controversy that you're dealing with?
Well, let me just clarify one thing. We reach out to external bodies on all issues, whether or not they are controversial. That is just a standard way of how we conduct the process. So even if it appears to be something that isn't controversial, we still do that reach back, because you'd never know when something is controversial. So we want to make sure that we're talking to everybody as possible. In terms of reaching out to the international groups, we've not done that often, because we have within the U.S., which is where the clinical modification is used, we look to U.S. experts. But we have had international experts reach out to us as well on other issues. They've not necessarily done that with chronic fatigue syndrome, but again, the option is there. But ICD-10-CM, as was ICD-9-CM, was developed for use in the U.S. So we are definitely looking to make sure that the U.S. perspective on something is handled correctly, which also is its own challenge on some occasions.
I think a follow-up, though, this is Nancy Klimas, to Lenny's question, is that there actually is only one organization, and it represents the United States. There is no American association. In fact, it used to be the AACFS, and it turned into the IACFS. So it's really the only group of experts to go to.
Donna has to be somewhere else, so I'd like to thank her for attending. Some very useful information, and I'm sure we can feed that into our discussions. And if we have any further questions, can we get in touch with you before the 18th, Donna? But thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Donna.
Thank you, Donna.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We just have to do roll call now, just to make sure that nobody's missing in action, and then we'll move on to public comment.
Or should we just go, we're figuring out, sorry. Should we just ask the people who didn't already identify themselves? I think that's more, so, yeah, so we have.
Hi.
3 people who are, or three who weren't before, so please.
So we're just doing the tardies now.
Yes, please. Making fun. You're standing out.
Nice to stand out. Deborah Willis-Fillinger from HRSA. Thank you.
And for the people who didn't know, there's a button on your left to make sure that there's a little red light here.
Elaine Perry, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
Charles Wells, National Institutes of Health.
I think that's, so we have everyone up here from ex officios and committee members. Let me just give a couple of quick housekeeping, and then we will start public comment. There is a message board at the back if people want to leave messages and get in touch with people. So we have a message board at the back. The restrooms, you go past the FEMA desk and to the left out here. And just for the committee members, we will be taking lunch orders at the break. So let us begin with public comment. So I do that? Okay. She has to tell me what to do here. Okay, so our first person for public comment, and we will have the people sit at the desk, remember, making sure that the red light is on, is Chris Williams.
Just a quick point of order, Nancy. Have we approved the minutes for last time? Or are we going to do that at some point?
We'll do that. We had a special issue this morning because we needed to make sure that we could get Donna here. Well, I think we should go because we have limited time for our public comment.
Okay, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public testimony today. My name is Christine Williams, and I was privileged to have served as an ex officio to the CFSAC for the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality until my retirement from the federal government in June of this year after 30 years of service. I'm pleased to see my successor, Beth Collins Sharp, is ably taking my place on the dais today. I spent my career in health policy and health services research, about half of the time on Capitol Hill as a senior health policy staff to the Senate Majority Leader, George Mitchell, and the balance at the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. In August of 2008, I had a sudden onset of flu-like symptoms that never went away. I spent 7 frustrating months having doctors tell me there was nothing wrong with me or that I wasn't tired enough to have CFS-ME. Through my persistent online searching, I found a practicing physician with expertise in CFS-ME who determined that I had 7 of the 8 symptoms established by the CDC. My illness significantly affected my personal and professional lives. I was no longer able to travel for business, needed to work at home on a regular basis, and too often did not have the energy to attend meetings to develop partnerships for the agency, which was my primary job. Because I was determined to complete the remaining 2.5 years of federal service so I could retire, I spent most of my limited energy working. I had to decline most after-work activities with my husband or friends. I spent evenings and weekends on the couch trying to rest so I'd have the energy to go back to work. And so I was very relieved when I was able to retire in June. I spent my career in government because I believe it can be a force for good and can make an important difference in people's lives. I've witnessed that positive impact both on Capitol Hill and in the executive branch. The Department of Health and Human Services has the opportunity and the ability to make an enormous difference in the lives of people with CFS-ME, but that opportunity has not been fully realized. I'd like to make a few suggestions about how the department might move forward towards maximizing that opportunity. First, the department must provide public and active leadership to move the debate forward. The Secretary, Assistant Secretary for Health, Drs. Collins, Jones, and Lee have all exhibited their commitment to this issue, but the commitment needs to extend to all levels in the department and the agencies, and the leadership must be backed up with action. Secondly, the department, through NIH, AHRQ, and other research agencies and divisions, needs to be a leader in CFS-ME research, making it a priority, building on new studies and partnering with academic institutions and others in the field. Reverse translational research from clinical experience must be part of this effort. Thirdly, HHS needs to be part of the dialogue around the recently developed international consensus criteria, which demonstrates progress towards sharpening the case definition for CFS-ME. A more refined case definition could be the basis of improvements in focused research, patient registries, etc. The existing babble and broadness of case definitions is a barrier to meaningful research and other critical efforts to find answers to this complex illness. Fourth, HHS can convene stakeholders. The 2011 State of the Knowledge Conference at NIH was an important start. Some of the researchers at the table had never connected before. HHS can create and facilitate an ongoing learning network with these researchers and clinicians to help them connect the dots across disciplines. And finally, the department must beef up its efforts to coordinate activities and initiatives across its agencies through this committee or through another group. Agencies should not duplicate efforts, and they need to know what others are doing. They need to partner to maximize resources and initiatives, and they must be a source of current scientific information on all of their websites. Finally, don't let difficult fiscal times and bureaucratic red tape be a barrier to progress. There are actions this department can take now. Move forward on the name change and other existing recommendations from this committee, which have been pending for some time. When the AIDS epidemic hit in the 80s, HHS rose to the challenge to find treatments for people who were dying. Patients with CFS-ME have lives that have died. They're in beds and on couches watching the world pass them by. This department needs to be a real leader in the search for effective treatments so that people can recover. And I know this great department of the people can rise to the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Your input is appreciated as always.
The next speaker is Mary Dimmick.
I'm sorry, I thought I was this afternoon.
We apologize.
That's
We're
okay.
having last-minute
That's okay.
changes, and
Not a problem.
you know what I could do? Let me just quickly list the next few so that people know what's
That's a good idea.
the order. So after Mary, we will have someone from the phone who will get through, then Andrew Bokelman, Mary Schweitzer, Pat Farrow, Kim McCleary. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me know if you can't hear me. I talk softly. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you today and for all that you do for the ME/CFS community. I am the mother of a 24-year-old man who came down with ME/CFS in 2010. Since then, I've had to come face to face with a harsh reality that my son is sick with a disease that others have suffered from for almost 30 years. 30 years during which our government has neglected patients by seriously underfunding research and diddling around with studies focused on psychiatric issues. Decades during which government mislabeling and inadequate definitions have led to the devastating disease being hopelessly confounded with general fatigue and depression. Breathe. I wake up every morning thinking that this really can't be happening to my son. What parallel universe have we just entered? I am here to ask you today for two things that are critical to getting us out of this mess: the reclassification of CFS in the ICD-10-CM and the replacement of FACUDA. Regarding the CFS reclassification, first let me state the obvious. CFS is a terrible name. It needs to be abolished. But CFS, not ME, is the term that we have to deal with in this country right now and other places as well, and it's not going to change overnight. Until CFS is replaced with the term ME, it's critical that CFS be properly defined and classified. Regarding the presentation that Donna had made, I'll give you a couple of quick notes. CFS is already listed in ICD-10 under neurological. It wasn't indicated in her presentation, but it already is there. Regarding option 2, the concern with option 2 was that, as stated, the intent was to use CFS for non-viral cases and PVFS and ME for viral cases. The best case definitions in the world do not discriminate based on the nature of the trigger, and it's not appropriate for it to do so in the classification. It's also not appropriate to continue to list chronic fatigue syndrome underneath chronic fatigue. I'm a layperson, and if I can go in and survey the literature and figure out that it's a neurological disease, it certainly shouldn't be listed under chronic fatigue. Given the CFSAC role to advise HHS on the science and definition of ME/CFS, I call on NCHS to partner with you to ensure that the final classification decision reflects the best option for both NCHS and this community. And it must be done in an expedited fashion before ICD-10-CM rolls out in 2013. Donna indicated that that was an option. It has to be done before rollout. Reclassifying ICD-10-CM is not enough. On its own, it's important, but not enough. It also brings me to my second request, and that's it's time to ditch FACUDA. It has to go. Patients, when this proposal came out, voiced a legitimate concern that we're reclassifying CFS as neurological and we have a class case definition that doesn't support that. The concern is that FACUDA does not describe a neurological illness. It does not adequately describe other facets of the disease or even require the hallmark post-exertional neuroimmune exhaustion as a necessary condition. What have we gotten instead with FACUDA? And I quote, "A conceptual framework to study fatiguing illnesses and a Chinese menu of optional symptoms." No wonder ME/CFS has become so confounded with depression and chronic fatigue. No wonder we have such paltry and potentially harmful information on diagnosis and treatment on the CDC website. God help the patients if the latest CDC educational efforts are still using this same foundation. With its focus on fatigue, FACUDA is incapable of reflecting what is known today about ME/CFS, but we have choices. We all know about the Canadian consensus criteria. We all know about the ME International consensus criteria that's just come out. These case definitions have been shaped by ME/CFS experts, the people in this room, working with real patients over the last 30 years. They reflect the specific nature of ME/CFS and accommodate the evolving science and resulting standards that will come from that in a way that Fukuda will never be able to. Given your role as experts on the science and definition of ME/CFS and advising the HHS on this, I call on the CDC to partner with you to take the reclassification recommendation to its logical conclusion, get rid of Fukuda and replace it with MEICC, a case definition that is grounded in the science of today, not the misperceptions of 1994. Until both of these things happen, 1 million sons and daughters are going to continue to suffer and die in their parallel universe. And I hope for your sake that the what next one is not yours. Thank you.
She did a tremendous work on the ICD. She did tremendous work on the ICD.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be by phone and has requested to remain anonymous, so we will not identify the speaker. What, can you show me how to turn it on? So. Excuse us while we figure this out. So now it's on. So do I have to hit 9 to get it?
Well, no, it's not.
Can you go on the internet right now?
Hello.
Yes, this is Dr. Nancy Lee at the CFSAC committee, and you requested to provide testimony for our committee.
Yes, I did, Dr. Lee. Thank you.
So I think you're very quiet right now. Let's see. Well, no, it's not your problem. It's we have to get the mic.
Okay.
There, now
Okay.
that's better. Go ahead.
Should I just talk for a little bit until you get the volume calibrated?
I think it's good now. Can we people
Okay.
back at the back here? Yes, we're good.
Okay.
Go right ahead, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Today I'm going to talk about money and death, show you why many patients with ME are dying from microvascular cardiac disease, and introduce you to the Women's Ischemia Syndrome Evaluation, or WISE, an NIH initiative which presents a huge opportunity for research synergy and funding on heart disease and ME. I'm asking you, follow the money, follow the dead. First of all, definitions. The endothelium is the inner lining of blood vessels. Microvascular refers to the smallest vessels. Ischemia is when your tissues are oxygen-starved. An atypical angina is when you get ischemia but have unobstructed coronary arteries. Persistent undiagnosed chest pain is rampant among ME patients, yet patients presenting with atypical angina receive rote cardiac tests focused on blocked coronary arteries, which routinely miss microvascular disease. WISE researchers don't fully understand the mechanism of ischemia in their patients, but they know that patients with clear as a bell coronary arteries can still have deadly ischemia. They might have coronary artery vasospasm, tightening the coronary arteries, reducing blood flow to the heart. They might have inflammatory narrowing of the lumen of the microcirculation. What WISE researchers do know is that microvascular and endothelial dysfunctions can and do kill. If ever there were a research direction for CFSAC to recommend, it's into the causes of premature death in ME. The NIH must learn that ME for many is fatal and invest accordingly. The WISE research is a strategically funded and continuing NIH initiative with which CFSAC-sponsored researchers could dovetail. The profile of WISE patients is uncannily similar to that in ME. There are many unanswered questions by WISE teams which ME researchers could help answer. It's a win-win. The WISE research arose because, contrary to popular myth, women die far more often than men from cardiovascular causes. In studying 80,000 men and women, cardiac mortality was 12-fold higher for middle-aged women than men. Women with crystal clear coronary arteries are dropping dead prematurely after years of atypical angina and neglect. The WISE research looked for novel markers for women's cardiovascular risk, and they found a pattern that should be eerily familiar. I submit WISE researchers are studying a population with significant representation by ME patients. Here's why. WISE teams found their patients had an inflammatory cytokine signature, including IL-6 and C-reactive protein, and that generalized inflammation predicted higher cardiovascular risk. They found comorbid conditions like IBS and FM and other signs of microvascular disease like Raynaud's and migraine. They found abnormal net lactate production, abnormal metabolism, and that exercise stress shifted reliance to anaerobic metabolism. They found abnormal pain perception and overlap with metabolic syndrome. They found high oxidative stress, and it was predictive of endothelial dysfunction and of cardiac prognosis. They found low functional capacity and early mortality from heart disease. They found harm avoidance, or was this post-exertional relapse? They found abnormal autonomic perception, or was this undiagnosed orthostatic intolerance? And they found a high frequency of past treatment for depressive symptoms, and most ME patients have at one point or another been mislabeled with depression. Given the many parallels between WISE and ME patients, research into microvascular endothelial pathology could prove pivotal for both groups. Bottom line, atypical angina is a condition which the NIH is pouring money and attention into. WISE researchers found that smaller anatomy, different hormones, and predisposition to vascular pathology prime women for microvascular dysfunction. If so, then many women with ME with their high oxidative and nitrosative stress, inflammatory cytokine cascades, and prevalence of vasculitic symptoms should be sitting ducks for microvascular dysfunction. Atypical angina is not restricted to women, and I'm not the only one pointing to microvascular risk in ME. Think Drs. Mikovits, Mason, Broderick, and the University of Dundee. But as a first step, overt collaboration with WISE teams could supercharge funding and foster recognition of the seriousness of ME. We could help WISE researchers differentiate depression and anhedonia from OI and PEM, but this won't happen if magnified CFS cohorts such as Fukuda are used. So please, follow the deaths, follow the money, set CSAC priorities that show recognition that ME can and does kill, and use robust ME criteria such as the CCC or ICC that require PEM. Additional information, recommendations, WISE team contact information, and references are in the appendix. And shame on CSAC for not making this meeting accessible to disabled and housebound ME patients through live video streaming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is another person by phone, Andrew Volkelman, so I will make that call. Yes, Mr. Volkelman?
Speaking.
Yes, this is Dr. Nancy Lee at the CFSAC meeting. Are you ready to give your testimony?
Yes, I think I am.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes, sir. And I think people can hear at the back of the room. Yes, we're getting a nod, so go right ahead.
Okay. Thank you to the CFSAC for allowing me to speak. My name is Andrew Volkelman. Before I became ill with chronic fatigue syndrome, I didn't take it seriously, but now I can tell you just how serious it is. In 2005, I was hit with chronic fatigue syndrome. In January 2008, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. 3 months later, I was diagnosed with a squamous cell carcinoma in my tongue. And now I also suffer collateral damage from cancer treatment. And after all of this, I can honestly say that having chronic fatigue syndrome has been much worse than dealing with 2 cancers. Because it is not cancer that keeps me from working and visiting friends. It's not cancer that makes me so sick I need help with basic personal care. It is actually chronic fatigue syndrome that has destroyed my life as I used to know it. Some people dismiss CFS because many of us don't look sick. But I also didn't look sick when I was diagnosed with cancer. And nobody used this to dismiss cancer. Other people dismiss CFS because some of us can articulate with the same strength and focus as healthy people. But I also articulated okay with a cancer tumor in my tongue. And I still can, despite stiff scar tissue, from radiation treatment, and nobody uses this to dismiss cancer. With most illnesses, people are seen as heroic for all they accomplish, despite being sick. But with CFS, our accomplishments are used to dismiss us. They are used to discredit us. So what is causing this dismissive attitude? I think one problem is the fatigue-centric model. The illness name is misleading. The description is misleading. Most doctors who know the full description still think in terms of fatigue. They look only for energizing solutions. They ignore inflammation, immunity, and neurocognitive issues. In my opinion, part of this problem could be solved if the name and description were changed according to the international consensus criteria. But I also think the available information about CFS is a problem. Imagine, if you would, that someone did a study on subjects who have chronic coughing and gave them sugar lozenges and found moderate improvement in some subjects. And then I took this study and claimed sugar lozenges treat asthma, while ignoring that the subjects were not evaluated for asthma, only for chronic coughing. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Yet, this is the type of thing that is being done with CFS. For example, on the Centers for Disease Control website, there is treatment information that cites Oxford criteria studies. These criteria define a different syndrome that only requires physical and mental fatigue. No sore throat, no tender lymph nodes, no post-exertion malaise. So it is not chronic fatigue syndrome, as defined in the United States. It only has the same name. And using different syndromes as if they are interchangeable is bad science, no matter what you name them. Yet, the CDC and others have been doing this for years. Do you think the Department of Health and Human Services would be complacent if their divisions used generic coughing studies to evaluate treatments for asthma, pertussis, or lung cancer? Would you like this approach used with the medical care of your family? In my opinion, the DHHS should stop condoning this, and instead they should explain to people how this corrupts the understanding of CFS. Further, the clinical section of the CDC website is missing important information about medications. Now, I realize that pharmaceutical research is very limited, but it is more reliable than treatment models based on the wrong syndrome. So why not include the better medications, but also explain the limitations? There is new leadership in key positions at the DHHS and CDC. So finally, the possibility exists for ending the practice of misrepresentation and selective omission of CFS information. I've seen some positive change already. I hope this is a sign of more to come and not just a brief flurry of activity. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so Mary Schweitzer is the next speaker, and we're going to distribute her testimony while she's getting up to the microphone. In just a minute, Mary, let's finish the distribution. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, you may begin. Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning. My name is Mary Schweitzer. I have been sick with this disease for 16 years, probably for 20 years, but I know for 16 years. I was a rising professor of history when I was struck down with it. Most people here know my history. If you don't know my history, I'll be glad to explain it to you. I don't want to waste time doing that now. The only reason I am here able to talk to you is because I'm on the experimental immune modulator Ampligen, which I have been on and off since 1999. When I am not on it, I relapse. I get too sick to be very coherent. I don't understand much of what's said to me. I'm in severe pain behind my eyes, back of my neck, severe headaches. I can't handle light. Eventually I get to the point where I shuffle. I have to lean on walls and things to walk. According to my doctor, I have viral encephalitis. Dr. Enlander calls that encephalitis, so I have viral encephalitis. I also have significant CNS damage, and I have a lot of muscle pain. Together, that is myalgic encephalomyelitis, or encephalomyelitis, as he would say. And that is what I have, pretty much by definition. That's my symptoms. Now, what else do I have? I am positive for a lot of immune defects, and I am positive for a toxic stew of viruses, some of which are in my spinal fluid. I have HHV6 variant A, HHV7, cytomegalovirus, Coxsackie-B, and I just got over another round of EBV. I've been diagnosed 7 times in the last 20 years with EBV. All of these are, 2 of these are in my spinal fluid. The rest were getting out of my blood. It's disingenuous to think there's no relationship between the viruses that are in my spinal fluid and my encephalitic symptoms when we think they were connected. But if you go to CDC's website, you would have no idea they were connected at all because CDC doesn't mention them. Now, I was going to, and that's what I wanted to talk about today, which is the discussion du jour tomorrow, which is CDC's website. I was going to talk about the paragraph that says do not test for viruses unless you want to say the person does not have CFS. And I just noticed that the paragraph has changed, so that's very nice. The paragraph has changed on the website, like in the last 2 days. It is better. But it still says, if I am positive for Epstein-Barr virus, I don't have CFS. Now, that's fine with me. I don't really want CFS. I hate it. Is that true? If I'm positive for Epstein-Barr virus, I don't have CFS? On the other hand, in the recent press release about EBV vaccine, EBV is a very nasty disease. If I am positive for it at least 7 times in the last 20 years, is there a danger I could get cancer? CDC doesn't have any information on this, but Dan Peterson does, and I suggest you listen to it. What about the other viruses I have? What are they doing to my body? That's why I have to stay on this medicine, but it costs my family an arm and a leg and our firstborn child. We're paying $20,000 a year, at least in medicine and testing alone. That brings me to what I was not pleased with, which is the CDC's toolkit for professionals. There's 2 new ones, which somebody in Ireland alerted me to. I wasn't aware of it. There's one that has a red cover and it's 8.5 by 11, and there's a pretty trifold. It's all sorts of multicolors and it's very nice. Both of them do the same thing. They emphasize cognitive behavior therapy and graded exercise as the treatment of choice for patients with my disease. Now, CDC has always said, oh, you know, you'll do better with some kind of psychotherapy if you have a chronic illness, and exercise is good for you. That again is disingenuous because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of research articles with a very specific type of CBT and GET for people with my disease, and that's what's being talked about. And if you don't think that's what's being talked about, then why is there a link on the website to St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London, which is British National Health Service, and has graded exercise therapy and cognitive behavior therapy. The theory behind this is that we have inappropriate illness beliefs. We aren't really sick anymore. We can learn to be well by having appropriate illness beliefs. What looks like sickness is really deconditioning, so graded exercise will make us normal. And that's the theory behind it, and that is what your website links to. It's not a surprise because Peter White has been a frequent advisor to this board, and Peter White is a psychiatrist at St. Bartholomew's Hospital. In fact, that's his psychiatric practice that you've linked to. Peter White is also chief medical officer to insurance companies, as there's also insurance links with the 2 other British psychiatrists you people have used as advisors, Simon Wesley and Michael Sharp. Now, the cognitive behavior therapy, we're going to pass on that. That's just sort of silly to think that you can cure somebody from HHV6 and EBV and myalgic encephalomyelitis with cognitive behavior therapy. What I'm worried about is the graded exercise part. We have on this committee, the chair of this committee, in fact, is a gentleman named Christopher Snell, who has done some excellent research on what is called post-exertional fatigue, which is a major symptom of my disease. I prefer to call it post-exertional relapse. What he's done is he, Stacy Stevens, and others at Pacific Labs did VO2 max stress tests of patients with this disease. And I got to say high-functioning patients, because I scored 15 on the first day. You wouldn't let me do a second day, I'm sure. But high-functioning patients and couch potatoes, people who are deconditioned, they scored the same on the first day. But you bring them back the second day. The couch potatoes do a little bit better because they're more used to the test. The patients with my disease score half what they did. It plummets. That's not a good thing. The VO2 max test is something used for cardiac patients, and not scoring well on the VO2 max test means that you're not using oxygen properly in your body, and you're not dispensing carbon dioxide properly. We can't do aerobic exercise. We can't physically. That test shows it. So what you're advocating is, one, cruel cognitive behavior therapy for a person who is really sick. Is cruel. Would you do that to a cancer patient? Hi, you have lung cancer. Step over here and we'll discuss your illness beliefs. Would you do that? But that's what they do to us. Second, oh, I forgot. Blue Cross Blue Shield of New York, Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield, is refusing to reimburse me, and therefore my Delaware Blue Cross Blue Shield won't reimburse me because they want me to go for 10 weeks of cognitive behavior therapy first. So it has snuck into the United States insurance system thanks to the CDC and thanks to these insurance psychiatrists. The second is it is not only cruel, it is dangerous to have people do graded exercise if you do not know what's going on with their systems. Dangerous. It's got to stop. And where it's really dangerous is in the hands of bureaucrats and when teenagers are involved, because they're going to kill them. Thank you very much. Glad I had a chance to speak. Good luck tomorrow.
And thanks for observing our time limit. I appreciate that. The next speaker is Pat Farrow. And you have 5 minutes. Pat?
I don't do gadgets well, I'm sure.
It's on right now. You're fine. I see the red light. So go for it.
Go on red, all right. My testimony is on potential misuse of funds, NIH grants.
Just one moment, Pat.
Yes.
We're handing out the, does everyone have it now? I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Thank you. The testimony that you have right now is what I sent in, minus a list of names and grants, individual expenses and so on. You don't have that part. So, and I hadn't intended to read any names anyway. I think that's just sort of born in a barn rude to be talking about people and not having a basis for that. At any rate, this committee has always been concerned about misuse of funds. I want to make it perfectly clear that I believe, after 9 years of talking with NIH people, I've met some gracious, wonderful people over the phone, in person, that there's no one in this room that's responsible for misuse of funds. I took a tutorial recently, July 2011, made by the grants.gov. You can go there. It's on the first page. It's wonderful. Defining misuse of funds. I'm not talking about embezzlement, but there are different kinds of misuse of funds. So based on that and my background knowledge, I recruited a miracle woman, Charlotte Von Sales, to help me go through all the information I had, highlight those folks where I was concerned, and then we went through a process. The process started where the GAO report left off in 2000. We went to 2010 because that's the area where I'm most familiar. Highlight those people where we thought there was some question because we're not familiar with them, like who's Caldwell. You know, our group is fairly limited. And then we had criteria. You won't find this much of this. I did some change, and at the end of your testimony, I said I reserve the right to change this. Went through the criteria. We took the grant number, the researcher's name, anything we could find about that person. Let's take just a Caldwell, for example. We went to the NIH reporter, looked at all tabs, and went to every link from those tabs to find anything about chronic fatigue syndrome or anything related to chronic fatigue syndrome. We looked at the PI's affiliation. Oftentimes on an academic website, you'll see a team, a picture, you'll see something where the researcher has published, the researcher has an interest in, it's there. For every Dr. Snell, Dr. Jason, Dr. Cook, I mean, there's information on CFS. We followed, and it could be a mouse, it could be blood, it could be questionnaires, it could be anything, something to indicate that this person had actually done work with chronic fatigue syndrome. We went to PubMed looking for any stray publications. We went to clinicaltrials.gov looking for any past recruitment or current recruitment for clinical trials. And last of all, Google. You can find much on Google, and followed all the links. So it's a 2 to 3 hour process per person. We started out with 47 researchers we had concerns about. Our goal was to eliminate as many as possible. We're not out to get anyone. That's not the point. There's two kinds of misuse of funds that are on those lists. I'm just going to give some examples at the end. One is where, first of all, misuse of funds. And I lost my spot, a little tough. Let's see. I have to find it because it's important. It's misuse of funds to materially deviate from the intent of the grant. Now, if a grant says orthostatic intolerance in CFS, but actually the person's studying orthostatic intolerance in diabetics or in something that's unrelated, you simply can't find anything on CFS, or there's no publications, et cetera, then that materially deviates from the abstract or what the research was renewed for or got the award for. The other kind is where the grant has nothing at all to do with CFS. There was a little one on here called CFS Computers. We left it because it was kind of funny. We had a good time trying to do this. It's a small grant, but nonetheless, CFS Computers, that's probably a clerical error. Using CFS funds on the last RFA, there was one grant. It was called Human Spinal Cord Glial Cytokines and Pain and Chronic Pain. I have been watching this one since 2007. Thank you. 2007. The total now is $1,310,000 and $1,310,840 numbers problem. I've been watching it, looking at the website. I've done everything I can with that grant. Finally, I called Sun City, Arizona, to find out if indeed the purpose of the grant was to set up a biobank. First researcher left. Second researcher is in the process of leaving. The department is shut down. There was never an FM biobank there. There was no intention of setting up an FM biobank. I have done everything I can to look at this grant. It's $1.3 million. That's a lot of money. Dr. Klimas or Dr. Jason could use that money. So there are people, that's one kind. Another kind is a person who says children of CFS patients, the offspring, no, patients with, or parents, well, the effect of parental CFS on offspring. I scoured these, trying to find anything to clear the names off the list. So you don't have a list of those. It's not probably important that you do have them. What you need to know is that I used the best source material I could come up with. I used FOIA requests to get basic information. Charlotte and I combed everything. If someone is using CFS money that's in the CFS budget, because these were all FOIAs, Dr. Lee, this came from the NIH, so I used those figures. I didn't, add them up on my own. So we intend to file this with the Office of Inspector General. And I'm hoping that we're wrong, but $18.65 million is a whole lot of money, and that was the total. Lastly, I do have one, it's a request for you, Dr. Lee.
Well, why don't you give it to me after the meeting?
Oh, good.
That'll
All right.
be fine.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kim McCleary. And then after that, we're going to have another phone call. Yes. And let's just have 1 minute, Kim, while they pass out your testimony. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Kim McCleary. I'm President and CEO of the CFIDS Association of America. Thank you for the opportunity. 2 years ago, when this committee met in October 2009, the session held in the Great Hall of the Humphrey Building had star power. The main attraction, XMRV. Called there to speak, retrovirology expert John Coffin, pioneering CFS experts Daniel Peterson and David Bell, and DHHS blood safety expert Jerry Holmberg. Testimony from patients and their advocates pleaded for you to investigate the finding published in Science magazine just days earlier. You did. DHHS mobilized resources across its agencies, the National Institutes of Health, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Food and Drug Administration. The blood safety community was rapidly engaged in these efforts through 2, then 3 task forces. The Blood XMRV Scientific Research Working Group commenced a 4-phase multi-lab study to evaluate testing methods and measure the threat that XMRV posed to the blood supply. Several intramural programs within the National Cancer Institute, the CDC's Retrovirology Group, and at the FDA developed testing methods to look for XMRV in close cousins. When publications from CDC and FDA/NIH groups were at odds, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases recruited renowned virus hunter Ian Lipkin of Columbia University to design and coordinate a multi-center study that would draw patient samples from expert physicians' practices across the U.S. and utilize the various labs' own tests to look for evidence of this family of retroviruses. The NIH Clinical Center recruited a new cohort of CFS patients and completed detailed workups at the nation's largest research hospital facility. The FDA's Blood Products Advisory Committee dedicated substantial segments at 2 of its meetings to hear from blood safety experts about the risk these agents posed. The Red Cross and America's Blood Centers instituted new policies to educate every potential donor, millions of people, about CFS, and to defer any potential donor with a past or present history of CFS. Other countries applied similar policies. That's what action looks like. Now, with more than 20 studies that have failed to confirm that initial finding, new information about the recombinant origin of XMRV, and recognition that it's a common laboratory contaminant, it appears the specific threat that sounded the alarm bells has mostly passed. The agency's emergency management systems got through the drill. Thank you. But guess what? CFS is still here. CFS is still wreaking damage on the lives of at least 1 million Americans and millions more around the globe. CFS still presents a threat because we don't know who will get it or why. We can't easily diagnose it, and treatment is still a patchwork of relatively unsatisfactory symptomatic Band-Aids. So out of the small country of Norway, on October 19th, again, just a few days before this meeting, comes news about a small phase 2 study of Rituxan that showed tremendous promise for 67% of the patients who received just 2 doses. Now the hunt is on for better clues as to why this therapy worked and how to make it better through follow-up studies. But right now, that hunt is only going on in Norway. I see tremendous opportunity to leverage many of the resources that were assembled to address XMRV. A well-characterized CFS cohort already identified by physicians at the NIH Clinical Center, where there's tremendous experience with the use of monoclonal antibody therapies, I might add. The NIH Undiagnosed Diseases Program reported a few weeks ago that in its first 2 years of operation, one of the most common diagnoses it made was CFS, another source of patients for study. The NIAID has invested in a multi-center network through the Lipkin study to collect samples, and CDC will convene a collaborative group of CFS experts later this month to talk about patient issues. This could be the beginning infrastructure to support a long-needed clinical trials group that could be activated to pursue findings such as the one from Norway. I hope I leave this meeting with a stronger sense that the emergency alert system that responded so effectively to XMRV will not go dormant. The main attraction that draws us here today, CFS, is still here. We need you to mobilize as urgently as you did 2 years ago to disarm it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
We have to distribute it. Okay. We should be distributing all of those at once. Okay. Don't take them at once. Yeah, but if we can. Okay. So the next person is somebody who is going to have a proxy read his testimony. And so I'm going to make that phone call now. Yes. Tina Tidmore is going to be reading the testimony of Toby Vogel.
Hello?
Yes, is this Tina Tidmore?
Yes, it is.
Yes, my name is Dr. Nancy Lee. I'm the DFO for the CFSAC committee, and I understand you are going to read the testimony for Toby Vogel?
Correct.
Okay, you may go. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In our society, being a man is associated with emotional strength, physical strength, and a strong character. I would like to ask the man on this committee, how would you feel if your physical strength was taken from you at age 18, as it was for me? Remember how manly you felt at 18? How would you feel if you tried to live on your own, but ended up living with your mother at age 34 because you cannot care for yourself? How would you feel if you could do none of the things that attract a woman, that is, get a job, provide housing or a car, or even have the strength to carry her over the threshold? How would you feel if a woman has to hold the heavy door open for you and your mother has to open the jars you can't open? I have lost not just my vitality, recreation, and the hoped-for career. I have also lost much of my manhood, or really, I never got it. However, I have not lost the strength of my character, and so, with courage, I am using my strength, my courage, to hold you, the government agencies, accountable to the American public, including me. In the last meeting, a CDC ex officio agreed to have some committee members advise the CDC on making changes to the website. Have you dropped the ball, or is the CDC resisting the changes? We have a right to know. Do you have the courage to show more loyalty to the patients instead of your fellow committee members or government employees and openly tell us why this has not been done in 6 months? I expect the CDC to correct the misleading and outdated information on their website or take it down within the next month. I also expect the CFSAC to provide live video stream of the meeting in recognition of the cognitive limitations we have. Do you really expect our patients to be able to hold a phone to their ear for 5 straight hours, 2 days in a row, and try to take notes? This would be difficult for a healthy person, much less the physically and cognitively disabled patients. I also expect this committee to create a more fair system for public comment, such as simply first come, first served. And who put CFS in a different code in the U.S. than every other country? And on what basis? And why is there continued resistance to the fact that the illness in the U.S., the one of the outbreaks at Lindenville and Incline Village, the one labeled CFS, is the same disease of the outbreaks in the UK at the Royal Free Hospital? It is one disease. Just as there are varying forms of lung cancer with many different causes, such as asbestos and smoking, in our case, there may be subgroups and different triggers, but we all have one disease. The NCH Option 2 contradicts the World Health Organization's ICD-10 coding and the clinical code manuals used in Canada, England, Germany, and Australia. It contradicts the research studies that show CFS often has a trigger. And I point out, this is the CFS labeled studies. It is the Fukuda criteria. Also, the CDC shows that CFS often does have viral triggers. The option 2 will make it so physicians are confused as to what research to apply to their patients. Do they have to determine the trigger, which is hard to do 6 months after the fact, and if it is a virus, do they only look at ME research and say that CFS research doesn't apply because it is a different illness with a different code? Option 2 makes it so my illness has 2 codes, and it will classify myalgic encephalomyelitis and post-viral fatigue syndrome as, quote, other chronic fatigue syndromes, which makes it the lead term for the disease. However, option 1 with ME, PVFS, and CFS in the same code corrects all those problems that puts it in the chapter for neurological diseases where it should be. And it brings us closer to doing away with the CFS term by showing there is one code for the one disease. So I expect you to recommend adopting option 1. You have a strong enough character to take a stand for what is right and do your duty to the American public? Will you courageously do the right thing, or will you allow the system to turn you into a wimp? I am a man. Are you?
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have, I think we have time for one more speaker, Nancy McGrory Richardson. And we're passing out her testimony now. Ms. Richardson, if you wait a minute. And after this, we'll have a 15-minute break. All right, 15 or 30. Okay, Ms. McGrory.
Thank you. I'm the Education and Outreach Director for Hemispherics Biopharma, and thank you for letting me speak. Let me bring you up to date on our progress with Chronix Biomedical, with whom in March 2011 we filed a provisional United States patent application on a blood test for chronic fatigue syndrome, CFS. The Chronix experimental approach analyzes fragments of DNA, often released into the bloodstream during a process of apoptosis or programmed cell death. Chronix is using its proprietary technology and advanced DNA sequencing platforms to measure alterations in specific regions of the chromosome, which can be detected as distinctive signatures in cell-free, blood-borne DNA. By focusing on these signatures, Chronix technology can detect the presence of disease-damaged cells in simple blood samples without needing to biopsy diseased cells or tissues. We believe the patented unique signatures captured by Chronix technologies have the potential to be useful as a companion diagnostic for CFS. In designing and implementing any new CFS trials, it was suggested by the FDA in their complete response letter to our new drug application, NDA, it would be valuable to first have a capability of utilizing a reliable diagnostic test to better identify potential participants. Once we have the confidence that Chronix diagnostic test is predictive, it will be appropriate to meet with the FDA to discuss the protocol for a phase 3 clinical trial. As there is no diagnostic test available at this time, the Chronix test may provide such a diagnostic, and further studies may also be able to predict differences in how individuals may respond to Hemispherics' experimental drug Ampligen. During IACFSME biannual conference held in September 22nd to 25th of 2011 in Ottawa, Hemispherics presented initial findings of our studies of the potential CFS markers. The aim of this recent CFS study was to find signature DNA sequences from patients with CFS compared to healthy controls with respect to their diagnostic predictive value, as well as potentially to provide new insight to CFS biology. DNA extracted from serum samples of CFS subjects and normal health controls was sequenced and compared to human genome. A total of about 10,000 high-quality sequence read were generated from each serum sample, and 4 genes were identified that separated CFS patients from the normal control group. These results support additional studies with a larger CFS cohort using more powerful sequencing platform and the aim of establishing predictive clinical assays for diagnosis and evaluation of CFS. The initial findings from more powerful platform are encouraging and consistent with previous results. Therefore, we plan to accelerate this line of investigation with Chronix. In our original request to the FDA for an extension of time in response to their complete response letter to our NDA, we submitted a protocol to prospectively analyze samples from our phase 3 study, AMP-516, for markers of a retrovirus called XMRV. During the course of this past year, the results of the number of studies by experts in this area have been unable to duplicate the original findings of Dr. Mikovits. Our current understanding of the science is that there may be a detection of some type of gamma retrovirus. However, the assays are too complicated and costly, and therefore it is a route we will not continue to pursue at this time. As with many in the CFS community, there's been a sense of disappointment. However, it does not change the positive effects of Ampligen in many CFS patients. Based on the initial findings of Chronix, we recently drafted a letter to request an extension to our NDA in accordance to the Code of Federal Regulations. Those regulations state that failure to take any action would be considered a withdrawal of the application unless the applicant has requested extension of time to resubmit the application. The regulation specifically states the FDA will grant reasonable requests for any such extension. We anticipate that the letter will be submitted to the FDA by November 25th and the request will be granted in due course. In February of this year, we reported it would take approximately 8 months to 3 years to complete an Ampligen clinical trial from the date the study is commenced, 3 to 6 months to close out the study and file the necessary documents to the FDA. The actual duration to complete a clinical trial may be different based on when the study commences, the final FDA acceptance of design, the availability of participants, availability of qualified clinical sites. Other factors could also impact the implementation of a study of analysis or requirements of the FDA or other governmental organizations. Some of you are aware that the FDA released on the news on the assignment of drugs developed to treat chronic fatigue syndrome, which states applicants for the products being developed to treat chronic fatigue syndrome had previously been assigned to at least 6 different divisions with OND and the Office of New Drugs. It went on to say that effectively all application for drug and therapeutic biologic products for CFS, regardless of the proposed mechanism, therapeutic product, or primary endpoint, will be assigned to the Division of Pulmonary and Allergy and Rheumatology Products. On April 19th, we were informed of the transfer of Ampligen to the DPARP. Over the course of the history with FDA, CFS, this will be our 5th division to which Ampligen has been assigned. It has been our experience that each transfer involves familiarization that consumes additional time. We are currently taking steps to try to ensure that the way forward is not negatively impacted by this change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we're going to take one more person. We are working to get as many people who have requested to speak to be able to speak. So next we will have Beth Schipper. Beth, I don't know if we told you a few moments ago, but you may, absolutely. While she's getting ready, the reason there's such a lot of confusion here is because, well, there is a bit. I feel confused. Is because 2 things. Some people we requested to speak and did not provide their written testimony to give to the committee. We are under FACA rules. We are required to have written testimony, and so we suddenly had to rearrange the schedule because we could not have those people speak. And secondly, we're having to do a lot of photocopying. So that's the issues we're having here. So just for future meetings, remember you have to provide written testimony to speak.
Just to echo Nancy's comments, Chris Snell, CIFSEC Chair, that this is an important part of what we do, and we make every effort to allow as many people to speak as possible. And so if you do want to make comment during this session at future CIFSEC meetings. Get your testimony in early so that the agenda can be organized and so that we can set up the conference calls ahead of time and get the live speakers ready to go. So thank you very much.
And we do appreciate your flexibility and willingness to speak.
Still missing, okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Lori Kroger, and I'm speaking on behalf of Beth Skipper. And in her testimony that you were just handed, in the very last sentence or paragraph, it says, "Words cannot convey how desperate patients are for basic compassionate care, let alone educated, knowledgeable, and proactive treatment protocols. It is hard to believe that this level of barbaric treatment continues to be practiced by some in the medical professions towards ME/CFS patients unless you witness this in person and firsthand." So Bob Miller and I are going to show you what happens in the emergency rooms, and these are based on true stories. I am the emergency room doctor. Bob is the patient. Go ahead, right here.
Hi, doctor. Nice to meet you. I've got an awful pain at the base of my skull, and it runs down my spine. It's a headache that feels like a knife has been jammed into my head. I'm nauseous. I can't eat. Noise and light kills me. I'm dazed and forgetful, and when I stand, I'm weak and dizzy. It's hard for me to even get to my bathroom. I'm wiped out all the time, no matter how much I sleep. Something really is wrong. I'm missing a lot of work, and I worry about my job. This has been going on for over 6 months now. I've seen 3 doctors, including a cancer specialist, as cancer runs in my family, but they keep passing me on. The pain and weakness is brutal. I looked on the web, and my symptoms mirror several different illnesses: MS, lupus, Sjorn's, and ME/CFS.
ME/CFS? What's ME/CFS?
Yeah, well, my health, my job has got me stressed out. The constant pain, I really need something for the pain, the migraines.
Let me see. So you've been stressed out lately?
Yes, I'm worried about my job.
Okay, well, tell me what this ME/CFS is. I have never heard of ME.
Well, they don't understand it. And when I say they, the doctors that I've been to, you know, I just seem to get so sick so fast overnight. It was like I had the flu, and it just never went away.
Now, are you saying chronic fatigue syndrome? And you've been stressed lately? Let me go check the CDC website and see what it has to say on CFS.
Okay.
I have here the toolkit right from the CDC website. Let's see. We need, it resembles a psych condition. We need mental health screening, cognitive behavioral therapy, need a team of health professionals, rehab, PT. There's no other therapies in here. I think I know what to do with this one. So the doctor comes back in the room, but as the patient is sitting there in the room, they hear remarks from the staff in the back.
They're crazy.
And so the Okay, I know what we're going to do. We're going to help you. We're going to get some tests. We're going to do some evaluation.
Okay.
We're going to we really need to do this to help you out. It says in the CDC book that we need to do a psych evaluation, so we're going to take you to the psych ward for 48 hours and do an evaluation. And this is really going to help you.
Okay, well, that sounds...
So you're going to go to the psych ward for 48 hours. So here he's going to come take you away right now.
Let's talk to someone who understands. No, wait a second. I thought somebody was going to help me.
No, we are. This is what the, this
No,
is exactly.
I'm not crazy. right?
This is
I've had this illness for, over 6 months
well, we have to see
now.
if you have an underlying condition. We have to see if you have depression, and we have to do some graded exercise.
I'm not
there.
depressed.
Well, this is the best for you, so go ahead, take him up to the psych ward, please.
Let's go.
Just take him. Just go ahead.
This is not going to help you. This is the same stuff everybody else is doing.
This has happened over and over again. I have a patient organization, and this has happened with 4 people that I have known of in the last year. People are afraid to go to the emergency room because of what is on the CDC website and what the toolkit tells them. There are no treatments in here, and we are treated barbarically, and it has to stop. So we are asking you to stop doing us harm and to please change the CDC website. And this is also why CFS needs to be reclassified in the ICD-10-CM in other disorders of the brain under the same subcode as ME, because it is a neurological condition. It's not psychiatric. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will have more more public testimony this afternoon. And again, thank you for your patience as we rearrange the schedule a bit. We are going to first ask that you get the minutes.
Okay. We should get the minutes of the last meeting approved. Oh, I apologize. My voice is loud enough without a microphone anyway, I think. So if we have no objection to approval of the minutes.
Point of order. I got an email from Megan who indicated that there was an error in one of her minutes. She might have emailed a couple other people. I just would like to suggest if it's possible for us to make that correction. I think you have a copy of it.
Yes, she sent, I've received several emails, and the one I got yesterday, she inadvertently included to the same thing. So we will correct it, but it may not be corrected until after this meeting is over, because I have to go back through. Okay, thank you. No, she had her email to me yesterday, so we will work on that, but we have to make sure that we have the right copy. But I commit to getting that done.
Good, thank you. And once again, this was Lenny Jason from DePaul.
Go ahead.
So I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes.
Galen Marshall, Mississippi, so moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, providing the change will be made.
That's Steve Kravchik.
Seattle.
So all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Minutes are approved unanimously.
So,
with the changes.
yes. I would like to do something that I would normally do earlier in the meeting, and that is to read a conflict of interest disclosure statement. We are convening this meeting of the Chronic Fatigue Syndrome Advisory Committee under the authority of the Federal Advisory Committee Act of 1972. All participants of the committee are special government employees or regular federal employees from other agencies and are subject to the federal conflict of interest laws and regulations. The following information on the status of this advisory committee's compliance with federal ethics and conflict of interest laws are being provided to participants at this meeting and to the public. We have determined that all members of this advisory committee are in compliance with federal ethics and conflict of interest laws. Related to the discussions at this meeting, members of this committee have been screened for potential financial conflicts of interest of their own, as well as those of their spouses or minor children and their employers. These interests may include investments, consulting, expert witness testimony, contracts and grants, teaching, speaking, writing, patents, royalties, and primary employments. We want to, let's see, do you want to go over the agenda now? I don't think we need to go.
Everybody's comfortable with it, some of the committee did not receive it in advance.
Okay, all right, so thank you. So we have, I think you now have the agenda in your notebook, and I just want to see if anyone has a concern or an addition to the agenda.
I just have one comment.
Yes.
Kim mentioned the rituximab study in her public testimony. I know that one of the members of the research team will be attending our meeting later today and tomorrow. So if there might be an opportunity to ask about that in the context of the research discussions, that would be a lovely opportunity.
Say that.
The Norwegian study that Kim referred to, the rituximab study, one of the investigators is going to be joining us. If he's not here yet, he's not here yet. But he said he would be attending this afternoon and tomorrow morning. Just to know we have that opportunity. Okay. It's a very exciting study, and I think it's raised a lot of interest in the community.
Thank you.
I would second an interest in that if the gentleman is here.
Okay, certainly. Anything else? Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Okay. We will break for until Dr. Coe is to be here at 11:30. If we have, we would like to take orders for lunch. And so, Marty, why don't you tell us how to
I'm going to ask
do that?
Brittany to do that since she's a contractor.
Okay. Okay.
It's in the book.
It's okay. So there
You've
is.
received it in your notebook and your binder. So if you just want to take a minute now, and the committee can certainly return to the Jupiter room, and we'll come and get you at 11:30.
And this, as I said, we are facing severe budget crises, and we have not been allowed to provide food at this meeting, but this should be more than adequately covered through your per diem.
So we're now officially on break. If people want to order lunch, could stay behind. The public need to take a break, then now's the time to do it. We'll reconvene promptly at 11:30 when we should be graced by the presence of the Assistant Secretary for Health, Dr. Howard Coe. Thank you.